Hello, my name is Martinez, and I'm making a top-down roguelike game where the player has to solve small puzzles whilst also being chased by the big bad boss until finally they had a big Dark Souls-inspired boss battle. There's been quite a bit of progress this month, so I hope you enjoy. Let's start with some juicy game design and all the bells and whistles surrounding it. To recap, last month we had an optimized dungeon generation and the Necromancer boss that had its main sprite and could traverse the level. The Necromancer received full walking animation where the Necromancer's head sways, shoulders swing and the legs move around. I tried to make it look menacing and almost imposing, and I think it's quite near what I wanted. While testing my game and seeing how the boss interacts with it, I had to reconsider some things. In my original vision, the boss had 3 stages. It would first start dormant and give players some breathing room. Then after some time the boss awakens and starts patrolling around the level, similar to Nemesis from Resident Evil 2. And when the player clears all the puzzles, the boss becomes fully aware of where the player is and becomes very fast, as to put pressure onto the player to start the final fight. The first problem that I discovered is that if I have a hard-coded timer to awaken the boss, it can lead to undesired outcomes. For example, imagine this scenario. Player picked her out, explored it and came to a dead end. And since the boss awakening timer is short, the boss is already awake and just cornered the player. Not very fun. Now imagine if the timer was very long. A skilled player could jump around the map, complete the tasks and avoid the boss pursuit entirely. Also not the experience I'm aiming for. In Slender, a horror game from many years ago, the Slender Man would appear close to the player when they picked a certain amount of pages, and I think that's a good idea. Tie the difficulty with the player's progression. To do this, I had several options, like exploring a certain amount of rooms, getting far away from the center or completing a sealed room. But all of these options would either create an opportunity for the player to be trapped in a corner or optimize their run to reduce the boss time, which are the problems we want to solve. I needed something far away from the spawn area and something that the player would almost accidentally trigger and couldn't avoid. It took me a bit, but eventually I found a solution. It's the sealed rooms getting loaded for the first time, which perfectly satisfies the both requirements as sealed rooms are on the far ends of the dungeon and the player has no idea what room they're about to see. But since this reduces the potential time the boss has to see the player, I decided to remove the patrolling logic and make the boss always aware where the player is. This also required me to reduce the Floor Guardian speed as to keep it more fair to the player, but of course, this might change with later updates, when I'm playtesting and getting feedback from other people. And before we proceed to the part that took me the most amount of time this month, I just wanted to say thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying it, why not liking and subscribing it? It would really help me a lot. Oh, and when I say subscribe, the button down below lights up. I wonder what color will it show when you press on it. Game music is awesome, and I think part of the greatness comes from that strong emotional association that is created when we defeat that one strong boss or reach a story climax. I think that's why whenever I feel low on energy when making this game, I tend to start playing Toby Fox's Undertale soundtrack and it always picks me up. I start to feel determination and that I can do it and it's going to be great. My original vision for the soundtrack was to make several layers and fade them in during various game events inspired by 2016's Doom and Devil May Cry 5. For example, getting some high-pitched tension sounds when the boss is nearby or some bassy action when in combat. But compared with some other games, like Risk of Rain 2 or Dead Cells, they seem to not rely on this and instead they just have a biome music and that's it. I started considering doing the same thing as to keep things simple rather than overcomplicate them and worry why things are not working out. What do you think? Would you continue with the idea of layered music in the chance that it will sound good, or would you just make a track and worry about other aspects of the game? Please leave your opinions in the comments, I'm curious to hear them. I sang in a choir for 12 years, which gave me a bit of a confidence that I could make some nice music, right? Oh, the hubris. I was already struggling at the tutorial watching stage. A lot of videos that I watched were about a person making a piece of music, them showing the iterations of it, and then presenting the final piece. And after these videos, I would end up thinking that now I know how someone else makes music, but what about me? The part that I struggled the most was converting what I had in my mind into notes, and I couldn't understand why. Am I missing experience? Am I just bad at making music? Or is there some missing piece in the process? Looking back, I think the fear of failure and just the sheer amount of work that I imagined that I had to do was overwhelming me. Even after reading Toby Fox's article about getting good at music, I still struggled, but at least I started practicing. I followed the advice I encountered when first learning about drawing: make small projects and make them often. And so I did. Some of them even ended up as background music for my short updates on Twitter. Don't forget to check them out. Eventually, during this experimentation period, I created the first piece for my game. I plugged it in, it was fine. So I shifted my focus onto more pressing matters, since I somewhat achieved the goal of having music in my game. But day by day, my dissatisfaction with the piece grew, and eventually I decided I need to make something better. Well, back to the learning. I looked for more tutorials and I did more practice, but nothing came out as I wanted, until I found this talk by the Dead Cells composer. And while I can't say that the talk itself solved my problems, after watching it, a sequence of fortunate events kicked off. First, the composer mentioned using war drums, which I got curious about as I was dissatisfied with the percussion instruments that I had at the time. Then I discovered some very nice free samples and downloaded them. After playing around with them, I then recorded some gameplay footage and loaded it into my music project. The idea was to always try to match the vibes between the music and the game, which was one of the things that composer mentioned. Then I stumbled upon a tool that shows what note the microphone is recording. This discovery led to an idea that first recording myself jamming out and humming alongside the rhythm, and then transcribing the recording into notes that could be played by some instruments. And that was it. That was the process that I've been looking for, since singing and humming are the things that I know and have done for a very long while, so it's easier for me to be more creative with it. While yes, I still have ways to go, this really was a leap in how I'm making music. I can almost promise you that you'll see some very cool new things next month, as I'm nearing a vertical build for my game, but that's the story for the next month, and until then, kiss you, love you, and bye bye.